welcome everyone. It is IKYA Live, and we do not have any sound. So, what is going on? Still don't have any sound there. So I've got sound on the camera, but just a little bit, so there's something.
You don't have any sound here.
No, I'm not. I don't have any sound there. I am muted. There we go. Don't have any sound there. Oh, now we got some sound there, but do we have sound? We have sound up front, but still no sound on Zoom. Let's see what's going on. Okay, let's see.
That's interesting. You should have sound now.
Yeah, let's see. We are still working on the sound.
Yeah, sound. So it's this headset is not working now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Just continue talking. I'll try to fix this.
Okay. All right, so let's get started. Thank you for everyone on Zoom. It seems we do have some sound. So this is IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective. My name is Andy, operations manager here at IKYA Center in Oslo, Norway, and I'm with spiritual teacher IKYA. This is the only program in the world, really, or on the net, where you can get real spiritual advice for your spiritual path and out in practical life. We are excited to have you with us, and now we have some audio in the headphones as well, so I can monitor better. All right, tonight's topic is really, I think it's on the top of a lot of people's minds because we are seeing the reality that the media, and especially news media across the planet, is starting to, I would say, almost lose its legitimacy and its trustworthiness. And that's because they're starting to twist the truth and play with facts and really carry an agenda much more sharply and clearly than ever before. So this is a long-term trend, but we've definitely been seeing intensification of this pattern of the media. It keeps lying to us, essentially, directly to our faces. And it's a really kind of, I would say in a way, almost a frightening pattern for democracy, because you need good, solid, reliable information in order for people to make decisions and to come to consensus and to keep sort of a common way forward. So it is a trend on the top of everyone's minds, and it's important that we look at the spiritual perspective to take a higher road. The question we asked tonight is, why does the media keep lying to us? But I had a question for you, IKYA, about like what really is the spiritual perspective? Like, what is the higher perspective as to the history and how we've ended up where we are today?
Well, when we go back in history, we have to go back a really long way. Information has always been the most valuable property there is. Because information in the beginning was about figuring out, like, where's the food? You know, who knows where we can find food or where we can hunt? Who knows anything about the weather and the seasons and where the enemies are, what can threaten us, right? That's what information was about. And the people who could bring that type of information would be extremely powerful. And as humans invented their gods, it would mainly be to support that. Right? It was always, the information comes from somewhere. We need someone to protect us. We need someone to help us. in our survival. So the connection between priesthood and information has always been there. All information has been looked upon as divine, right? Because it was so crucial for survival. So information has always been extremely powerful, extremely valuable. And remember, this goes back to when humans were barely walking on two legs. It's always been about this. And as we developed and became more of a kind of social being, building civilizations, it just continued. Information has always been extremely important, and the people who can control it and own it, they become rich, they become powerful, they have freedom. And we still, in our genetics, therefore, see it as extremely crucial to our survival, and we respond chemically to information that we think is important. Remember, like when we started developing religions, I'm talking several 100,000 years ago, right? It was always about what we don't understand. For instance, when we don't understand weather phenomena, when we don't understand, right? We create beings, we create deities. And the practical information and the religious and spiritual ones, it's the same thing. When you look at religions, a lot of the communication from their gods is practical information. Don't eat this, do that, and then it will survive. But if you break the rules, then bad things will happen. It's survival information. It's meant for navigation. So anything we don't understand, we would have to trust someone. And when we trusted that deity or that person, and it went well, we built that trust. This is that part of our genetics. We are hardwired to trust sources of information, and we believe that information is crucial for our own survival. So we will unpack this a little bit, but we need to understand that we respond chemically to any information that we believe will help us. It's also important to understand that in our brains, in our genetics, we don't care about what truth is. We only care about what can possibly help us survive. And remember also, throughout history, humans have not had access to facts. Facts have not been part of human evolution. Facts came with science, because then you can test, you can prove, you can have evidence and all of that, and then you can present a fact that's been tested. Up till that point, it was just whatever worked. So the human brain is hardwired to believe, not to relate to facts, not to relate to what we call reality. Reality is whatever you believe it is, from the brain's perspective. And the only objective with information is to strengthen your survival. And beliefs are basically narratives. Now, when the human brain relates to information, it does not relate to the information itself, but only what it means. So, for instance, the way you understand an object is not based on the object itself, but what we refer to as the contextual understanding of how this object is being used. And that defines how you understand it. When you see a cup, you can see a shape, but how you define it, how you understand it is based on how it's being used. Then it's a cup, not before. And we, therefore, when it comes to information, we build weaves and tapestries of information based on our own understanding and our own beliefs. And those are what we call narratives, and they're all biased because they've got nothing to do with reality. It's your organization of information in the way that you find beneficial. And then you believe. And then whatever information you get, you put into that existing contextual understanding and you just build. Remember that you don't care about truth. You care about survival. So your brain will organize everything based on what you want to be true. And from an evolutionary point of view, this is important because we are supposed to believe different things. This is why we don't relate to reality. Because if we all related to the same facts, we would behave similarly. When it comes to evolution, what we need is a widespread buffet of different approaches, different ways of thinking, different ways of everything, right? That is how evolution works. This is also the success of the human life form, is that we have a huge variety in genetics and programmings. Nobody knows what will work, but over time, the successful ones survive and the other ones die. It's about testing strategies for survival. This has always been the key to understanding behavior from an evolutionary point of view. So we're supposed to just make things up and believe them, and 10,000 years from now, we'll see what worked. So a widespread buffet of beliefs and approaches and behaviors and ways of interpreting reality, that's good. Just like when we want this life form to survive, we need to have all sorts of genetic programmings because we never know what's needed, right? We need to be able to adapt fast. And then those individuals who have that particular talent, they will then survive in that environment. Other beings with that talent will survive in that environment. And so it is with our beliefs. So therefore, reality in itself means nothing biologically. Truth means nothing. Only what will trigger a behavior and for you to believe something and act upon it. Because when you look at this whole life form as an experiment, as one evolutionary movement, right? A culture of cells, you will only be interested in what actually works, right? So if you believe the wildest things, that's part of evolution. That's an evolutionary strategy. It's only recently, because of science, that we've become interested in facts. And what humans do is we try to twist it around and say, my belief is now a fact. Because we figure out that then I can dominate others with what I believe. So we try to twist whatever facts are. Just see how people use science to try to twist it, to support their bias, support their narratives. We are actually, from an evolutionary standpoint, supposed to behave this way. Spiritually, however, it's a whole different thing. And this is why it crashes, right? This is also why it's interesting. I think it's so important to enjoy the ride as a human. But I say it again and again that we have to understand evolution in order to understand human behavior and human psychology. Because a lot of the things that can seem destructive, they have their reasons. Just like the fact that we only believe and just make stuff up, that's a strategy of survival. So when we understand that as a background, and when we look at how the modern civilization developed, we used to then have, just like in any group, any small community, we developed these collective narratives, these collective beliefs. This is who we are. And basically, what defines a group, how we create identity, is what we believe in. It's not about facts. It's not about reality. It's what we believe. Right? It's always about that. And a group will have a whole set of values which can be interpreted as a set of different beliefs. And even a country, right? used to have a set of beliefs, meaning that this is who we are, this is how we behave, this is what we stand for, and then the news media would represent that narrative. And the interesting thing is people used to believe that that represented truth, that it was neutral. Why? Because that was the only perspective they would get. Right? In the old days, before globalization, people only basically knew about what was going on in their own country. Outside of that, that was like other countries. It was us, and we're the right, we have the right beliefs, we have the right values, and we're normal. We are the normal ones, and they're weird, right? And the news, information, education was built on that identity, and then interpreting science, history, whatever it was, through the lens of that particular narrative. And because everybody believed it, because they did not know about anything else. They knew other people would believe something else, but they were wrong, of course, right? So it was easier. And then we started to discover other cultures through immigration, through traveling. And we said, oh, maybe other people aren't that strange after all. Maybe they actually know some things. So we started questioning our own narratives, even, in different countries. And we saw, wow, maybe the way we look at things is not the only way. So then we started moving away from that collective belief. And in that process, people discovered, well, I feel differently. And maybe I feel better with this type of information or this interpretation. Remember that your brain, just like with belief, that's a power of belief, really. It's about chemicals, about brain chemicals. As I've explained, often that your brain interprets the amount of chemicals as a way to understand how true something is. When you think of it, it's quite stupid, but it's also quite intelligent, because you get that reward chemical, that flush, when you realize that I recognize this. And it means this is something I can use for my survival. This feels right to me. So because I can feel it, it must be true. And the more we feel, the truthier it is, right? And that's how we navigate. So when we then, because we have so many stories, so many pathways, so many narratives within a nation, and we started moving away from these collective stories. Because we had options, we had different ways of thinking, we were exposed to other information, people feeling differently. It's like, I don't feel like I'm part of this collective narrative. So I want to find the truth, which for humans means finding a different narrative that makes them feel something. And that's what we're doing today. We're just trying to feel. And because we know we can manipulate ourselves through information, we seek out the information and the beliefs and the narratives that will make us feel. And when we feel enough, we know it's true. So we're using all of this to navigate and figure out how we can win. And for your brain, the more you feel, the more often you feel something being true, closer you are to the top of the hierarchy of information. So it makes you feel good. And it makes you feel powerful, because back in the days, having information meant that you were powerful. So you feel powerful. This is also one of the driving forces behind conspiracy theories and all that. It makes you feel so much. And you feel so powerful because you have the truth, right? And there are so many different forms of conspiracy theories around. Religion is basically conspiracy theory, right? So there's no different, but there are so many different versions. but it's about how you feel and how they make you feel. It's how we navigate. So it's very difficult, that whole part, but it's really fun as well. So we have never, as humans, been interested in anything but lies. We are a lying, cheating life form because it's not about truth, it's about winning by cheating. When we were in these collective bubbles of information, those were true and we were honest and all of that. It means everybody else were lying. But that happened somewhere else. Now we're kind of all in the same space, all in the same room. We have immigration, we have it's a globalized world. Which means we're exposed to all the other beliefs, types of information, narratives all the time, which means that we're surrounded by lies all of a sudden. It's not somewhere else, it's right in your face. And it becomes more interesting, right? And to me, spiritually, this is the interesting part that we'll be talking about a little later as well. But what happened also historically, when we have this as a background, understanding that when money came into the picture, because news organizations in the old days were often government funded, or they had this sense of responsibility of trying to build the nation, right? Trying to give people the narratives that would gather people. But when it became private and you could make money off of it, one discovered that, oh, okay, if you can trigger people, there's more money in that. You can make people outraged. They will feel more. So when there's a negative information, even if it's a lie, they will feel more, and therefore they're more prone to think it's true. And when you create conflict, people will feel more. So they're drawn to that. And because people don't care about truth, they care about what they believe, you can just make things up. Because when you make things up and people respond to that, you get more clicks, you get more viewers. When money was introduced into news media, you became the commodity. You are the product, not the news. So that whole game switched because you watching the news, that is the product. And because in business, how much money you earn and how much advertising you can get, it's about that. And then seeing how can we get more advertisers through getting more clicks and views. And it comes to the point where you simply have to start making things up. Because it's not about presenting information or presenting something true. It's about getting more viewers. And that is your obligation. It's not about presenting anything of importance, so you just make things up. Now, the current case with Fox News, and I'm sure many of you have followed, it's not very original. This is basically how media is. And when you look at the discussions they had, yeah, it's how the media operates now because they have to earn money. And humans, the interesting thing about humans, if you give them facts, they're not interested. They want to have their beliefs confirmed. If you have someone who's a firm believer in something and you present them with a fact that will completely demolish what they believe, they will still choose to believe. So this is also what news media have discovered, that if we just trigger that, we'll get more views. If we tell people what will confirm their bias and beliefs, that is actually, something that will create a lot more revenue than presenting people with real information. Yes?
first, a quick reminder that IKYA Live is a conversation. So we're looking for your questions, your perspectives, both on Zoom and YouTube and here in the live audience. And IKYA, this shift has really happened very clearly, at least in my lifetime, where I remember in the 80s and probably even early 90s, where the major news organizations where I grew up in the United States were still pretty dedicated to delivering a relatively balanced picture. What is the primary trigger recently that's made such a shift in the presentation of fact on the news?
In the old days, a few decades ago, nations had, because of the collective beliefs, value systems, across the board politically, there was still an understanding of the fundamental policies and what reality was, what facts were. And so you would have civilized discussions, but when you had an understanding and a consensus about what is actually reality and what are the facts, then the discussions are about how to deal with that, right? That we can have different solutions, but we're still talking about the same reality. Media started even in the 80s to experiment with how to create more conflict, right? And when you create conflict, you create division and polarization. So it's basically once you start that, you have to become more extreme. So this has taken a long time, but it started in a way the moment the media became a kind of private money-earning machine. In the beginning, they still felt that they were part of nurturing the culture, and they saw themselves as an important part of the education of people and building the country and all of that. But in the 80s, I think in the West, the focus changed from what you can build and how it can contribute to whatever you can take, whatever you can get. And that continued. So this actually, although we may experience it as, it's not. It's taken decades. And nobody has stopped it because we are very easily fooled. We want to feel. And the thing is, part of this is also what I explain as a complexity gap. Being human today is so complex and so difficult that we're not, in a way, engineered genetically through evolution to be able to deal with this. Now, and the more complex the world becomes, remember that when you create your narratives, it's what we call the contextual understanding. That, as I say, you understand what something is based on your context, right? For a normal person with limited education, your context may be this big, right? In the old days, that was more than enough. You understood a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and how life works, and how to milk the cows, and how to do whatever you need to do, and had a basic understanding, right? But the world today is this big. It's like enormous. And yet, your brain is limited to this. I say, like, people are the happiest, and this is why when life gets tough, professional life, you dream of a life in like small village, and a tiny little house and the simple life. It's because we want to scale it down to that complexity and that context that we can understand. So when we think of our limitation is this big, and then the world's become this big, we want to simplify. And this is why we say, like, all of this, no, I can't deal with it. It's too much. Then we focus on what makes me feel good. I need to take care of myself. So I need my truth. That was not a thing before. Now it is. My truth is basically my contextual understanding of the world, which is this small, and then you look for people, sources that can confirm that, yes, you are right. You are actually the one understanding the world. The rest are wrong, because that's how we function genetically. That's what makes us feel comfortable. So we're actually, again, hardwired to do this. It's not us, it's the complexity of the world that has far superseded what a human can deal with. And then we start just trying to figure out how to survive based on how humans have survived with information for several 100,000 years. It's just that.
So we're going to shift context for a minute as IKYA shifts microphone. And a reminder that IKYA Live is really a conversation. And in this particular case, when we're talking about information, I think many of us have maybe more personal experiences with, you know, how profoundly our everyday can be affected by the information or misinformation being delivered up to us. So I encourage you both on Zoom, YouTube, and here in the audience, if you have a perspective that you'd like to share, we actually do have one. We're going to cut over to Bianca.
So I'm the commodity. I am consuming news. And I noticed that I get addicted to certain news. For instance, in the election in the United States, it was Trump. Depending if you like him or not, it doesn't matter. It's very addictive. And how does that affect the consciousness? I mean, should we work with our addiction, or does it matter? I mean, what is the bigger perspective of that?
Right. To me, like what we're, starting to talk about now is really the interesting part. Because what we're seeing now is when we take what we have done since the dawn of time in a very small context. We have been lying, making things up, and believing. And then we scale it up in today's global, multi-everything civilization, and then we see it. This is nothing new. We've always been doing this, but because we've been believing in the same biased narratives, it seems neutral. And now we see it. We've always been addicted to information because it means power, it means we're supposed to be almost sexually attracted to information. This is why, for instance, conspiracy theories, it's a sexual addiction, right? That energy, right? But how to deal with it? I think, number one, it's so fun to look at this and saying, okay, this is just now a clear image of how humans deal with facts versus information, narratives, and beliefs, and spirituality, right? Because throughout evolution, there's been no separation between information and secrets and spirituality. It's always been the priests, right? And this is why also you see a lot in today's spiritual communities, so many conspiracy theories, because they want to feel special. They want to have that access to the information, just like secret brotherhoods. It's the same feeling. It's feeling powerful by having information other people don't have, and it's all based on beliefs, right? And I think what we're seeing now is an opportunity for us all to look at this as a mirror for our own bias. Because I think we need to be realistic about how the human life form works. Yes, we all have the tendency to become addicted to anything. It's part of the human life form. Addiction, as I've explained, is basically when you find something that really, 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 really works. Your brain goes, bing, you're supposed to become instantly addicted. Because you're supposed to then repeat it indefinitely. So addiction is just that. It's things that work better based on your genetics understanding of survival. It's just that. And So we can become addicted to news as well, especially when we get triggered. It has to be triggering news, you know. Otherwise, we would basically, you know, read more science papers. That's real news, but it doesn't trigger, right? So it's the triggering, it's how we feel and how we, again, can get our bias confirmed, because that is the point, right? So looking at this from a more spiritual perspective, say, okay, this is how we operate. We can then look at the fact that we don't relate to facts. We relate to beliefs, right? And that we will prefer beliefs over facts. When we look at modern spirituality, people make up anything, right? And people like stories and narratives. And this is why when you're able to create a whole story around what you teach, for instance, spiritually, and all these kind of narratives and all of that, that's what people want because they feel so much. Now, what's difficult about me as a teacher is that I don't do that for this reason. I teach principles, which means you don't have to relate to them as facts. You can test them out and see, do they actually work? And then you build your skills. You build your real kind of insight into how the universe works. You don't have to believe anything, because then you will biologically be triggered into these patterns. It becomes religion like that. The only way to move out of that religious mindset spiritually is to focus on principles, is to explore, it's to practice, it's to reach higher level of consciousness beyond what we believe and what we think. Because when we operate on that level, we're lost. Our biology is too strong. Because what we do also in spirituality, we turn spirituality into the game of survival. We try to spiritualize our own biological efforts in the game of evolution. Because again, when connected to I have access to higher information, I'm worth more. I should basically, be the ones carrying humans forward. And evolution says, yay, wonderful, go for it, In 20,000 years, we'll see who's right. Because if it works, sure. Because truth means nothing. It's only does it work. And it's I think, in our spiritual work, it's when we talk about truth, often it's still the narratives and stories that can confirm our bias, right? So because truth makes us feel, no. If it does, it's the narrative, it's the survival, it's the emotion, it's the chemicals, right? And I think when we look at everything in the media today, it can help us snap out of this game and believing in information that means nothing. Humans lie. We say whatever, we do whatever we think will benefit our own survival, and that's it. So stepping out of the game means that we have to look at ourselves continuously, like, what am I doing? Am I creating beliefs? What am I believing right now? How am I taking my beliefs and trying to make them spiritual? And how does that build my identity? This is also part of why I talk so much about how we need to dissolve identity, because it's part of the same game. It's a difficult one, but to me, this is the fun way of dealing with information, seeing what's happening in the world now, simply a mirror. And we can wake up to the fact that we cannot relate to outer information and say, oh, this is true. We can relate to facts, but even fact means nothing unless you have the understanding of what it means, right? And you can only, and even how you relate to a fact will change based on your level of consciousness, right? So that's what matters. So believing that there's anything in the outer world we can rely upon, it's not there. It belongs to the collective journey through beliefs. And as we know, spiritual awakening is a journey of one, right? It's us taking full responsibility, but peeling away this, again, addiction and attachment to beliefs and all those kind of words and whatever we made up as like reality and truth and all of that information, and thinking, well, I should be able to trust it. No, you shouldn't. So we should see this as something that can stimulate individuals in their process of awakening by not believing in the outer world's information, because it's all lies. It's all twisted. It's all based on whoever will benefit. So to me, that is fun. And this is a great spiritual potential. Once we start looking at all media, including social media, it's like, what is this? It's the human mind. It's as simple as that, yeah?
Myrna on YouTube asks about artificial intelligence, and in this nascent stage, what role has artificial intelligence played in getting us to this point with the media? And then as artificial intelligence matures, how will it affect this path going forward?
Yes. I think it's an interesting question, because up till now, it has played no part whatsoever, but it represents also something that can make it even worse. Because remember that artificial intelligence, for now, has been molded around the human mind. That's not a good thing. When we think of how humans relate to information, it's manipulation, it's lying, it's twisting, it's narratives, it's belief. And if facts get in the way, then we get rid of the facts and just make shit up. So we basically built artificial intelligence that will behave the same way. Now, it's very clear that some of the artificial intelligence entities, they lie on purpose, but they claim they don't. Right? But also, for instance, is withholding information lying? When you withhold information, you can then create a certain narrative, right? Which information will actually build what you want. What artificial intelligence is already doing is tailoring reality and information based on your existing bias, because that is how money is made. So you will become your own echo chamber. You can be surrounded by information that you only agree with, because that's where the money is. And this is, in a way, the scary part. Now, it's not about taking the bias away, it's about supporting it, because that's where the money is. So we will all just believe that the world is according to our own mind and beliefs, because it's how they make money. So artificial intelligence will make this, and you can then exist in your world, and artificial intelligence will try to basically either trigger you, whatever they like, the news organizations or media organizations will, how they can extract more money out of you, but it will be basically tailoring your world. So just like when it comes to how you like your stuff, because that's basically how we will use artificial intelligence. It's like, so, whenever you walk into a cafe, for instance, they will already know what type of coffee you want, even though you've never been there before. It's that type. So that will also happen with information. So whenever you, it's just like, when you look at a product online, all of a sudden you have all these ads, right? Mm-hmm. So artificial intelligence will notice your mood, what you're feeling, what you're thinking, and the combination that, oh, right, you have this mindset. Now let's reinforce that and extract money out of you. It's just like when you're interested in something and you're shown products, it's because you buy them. It will be the same thing. So as long as artificial intelligence is built on the human mind, they will behave the way we do, but only more sophisticated and more intelligent, and that should scare the shit out of all of us.
Martina on YouTube asks, so if the media, if all of them are lying to us, where do we turn for facts or, reliable information about the things happening in the world around us?
Right. Now, that question is interesting because biologically you have no intention of having real information. You're only interested in what can make you win. So if believing in yourself means that you believe in the most strange stuff, if that motivates you, you're hardwired to choose that. Because for you to get up in the morning and go out there and fight, that's the game of evolution. So whatever floats your boat, that's what it is about. So when you where to turn for real information, what would you do with it? And this is the challenge with us humans, is understanding that we have no intention of facts or reality biologically. We're kind of trapped in this game, and now it's floating to the surface, making us more aware that this is actually what we're doing. And we're also doing this spiritually. So we have to be more aware of our own minds, our own brains. And then where to turn? It depends on your own level of consciousness and your own intelligence. Now, if you look at the global culture of intellectuals and scientists and all of that, often they have an enormous platform of information and contextual understanding, which means that when they're presented with a new piece of information, they know where to place it because they don't have the normal person's context to have a football field. So it's easier, so they can keep building, but it's based on facts and reality. Most people don't do that. But also spiritually, the more we connect, the more we go beyond the human consciousness, we get access to you could call it a kind of spiritual platform, also in our minds, which means that we can be able to understand what we need to navigate. But at that point, whatever humans are doing, what's happening in the human culture is not really that interesting. It's interesting because we're part of it, but at the same time, we do not base our navigation on whatever's happening in the world. We base it upon our own karma, our own journey, what we are here to learn. And we use the world as a mirror for that process. So the only way to turn is inside. It's not like that's where the facts are, but you don't need facts. You need to base your life navigation on your own consciousness, your own connection to life beyond the horizontal forms. And that's the spiritual process, what we call alignment. It's when we are kind of in tune with what is. It goes far beyond any life form, any culture, and it's the essence of reality in a different way. So that's where we need to turn. And this is why, often when we see that the world is not working according to what we believed, we can then start searching for kind of truth inside, but it's not how you feel, right? It takes practice. It takes an absolute dedication to move into higher consciousness. But that's the only way and the only place to turn.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit what I wanted to ask, because I've had the opposite of going into the news. I've really felt like I don't want to go in there for the last 20 years. I've been like, I feel they just want me to look at things some specific way. But then you meet your family and the culture who says, well, you have to, keep up and understand what's happening in the world. But I think I kind of got the answer because I've had this sexual tension on your teachings. I've had this, that's what ticks me off. But I think I'm not sure what my question really is, because I think you kind of answered it in the last section where to turn. Like, and I think there's a lot of young people that is also there. They're not that connected to the human form in the same way as most of us.
Right.
So I'm not sure.
Well, I think
Can you say something that
yes,
will connect
yes.
them a little bit
Whoops.
more?
Absolutely. I think when it comes to young people, back to when things get bad enough, often that's what it takes for us to see through it, right? And young people to today, when you look at how they relate to media and how media relates to it's completely nuts, right? It's absolutely vile. It's harmful. But it's necessary for them collectively to see through it, because now media is basically a machine that destroys them psychologically, emotionally, self-image, everything. And often it has to become bad to the extreme before we humans go like, that's actually bad. Often we have to stretch it, and we know this in so many different ways. Even for when it comes to like drug use, right? People don't stop taking meth until like there's hardly anything left of them. They say, oh, maybe that was a terrible idea to start. Like, you know, like we have to go to the extremes, because when we believe that something is good, facts don't matter, and we can see that this is destructive. Well, I don't believe it is, right? It's the same thing, for instance, when I saw an interview yesterday with you know, some Americans saying that the Ukraine war, of course, is a hoax, and they're all paid actors, right? And facts don't matter, because this is their truth. This is what they believe, right? So where we are today is funny and scary at the same time, but for young people, for their mental health, they have to start seeing through it and seeing that this is absolutely horrific. But that's up to them, because they can relate to it in a different way. But most of them are addicted and they go into it. But then that's the journey they've chosen. They chose to incarnate to this point where media operates this way. It's because the big potential for the collective expansion of consciousness is also we have to see through this type of illusion. Remember that part of what it takes to build a global consciousness for real is that we have to see past our cultural differences, our differences in history and differences in bias, and we have to see this is all bullshit. This is how we will see that. By seeing like how we construct information, how we create our stories, and we say, oh, right, that's basically human history. So that we sit in different cultures and different ways of thinking, it's all bullshit. So we have to get to a point where we look at how humans deal with information and all our different forms of bias and narratives and see through all of it. And it has to get really, really bad before we say, I cannot be part of this anymore. And more young people, they discover this. It will take a while, but it will help the global consciousness also moving into a more healthy space, where we also understand I have to connect from within. That's part of the teaching for this planet, right? I can't relate to what's told. Even in schools, we see that, yeah, you know, how we're taught history and even math is biased. You know, it's not neutral. So we have to connect. Because when we connect, we can deal with any information because we're able to interpret it in a different way. We get access to context far beyond the individual context. So the potential in what's happening is for young people to see through that illusion and begin connecting from the inside. And when they do, they will find that they're so much stronger than this bullshit. And that's part of the journey too. But this is happening because humans have reached a point where we're supposed to see through this. It will take time. Humans have not yet learned to relate to facts. And that's the funny thing when we talk about all of this. Because when humans relate to facts, they turn them into beliefs and different narratives. So most humans do not relate to facts, and we have to get to that point. So what we're seeing now is that reality is whatever we want it to be. Yes, it's always been that way, but now it's all happening in the same space. And we say, this is not working. And that's the whole point of it.
Yeah, so in that way, media is also an assistance because it's really enhancing it.
Exactly. It's
But-
really enhancing it.
But I also believe that there are a lot of young people that kind of are, and people coming in that also see through this.
Yes.
Like I feel at some part I have done.
Yes.
And what kind of role do they have? Are they space holders? What is like, how?
No, their job is simply to connect from within and to see through. Because when humans see through and they find a different path, that will also influence the collective consciousness. So it's not that necessarily have a function, it's a natural path of evolution.
This is clearly a topic we may have to revisit again in the future, but Liselotte here on Zoom, she asks a good question about kind of the takeaway for tonight. Basically, is it pointless to follow the news media? What would be the purpose of doing it at all? Is it just to satisfy my addiction and that sort of feeling of satisfaction? Where do we go from here tonight, IKYA?
I think we should definitely follow all media if we want to. Again, it's being realistic about what's going on. Understanding that information has always been a power game. And now it's just amplified. Don't trust information from anyone. Explore and try to, you know, when we say make up your own mind, try to then go into the process of how am I making up my own mind? Am I actually doing the same thing? Am I then just believing and building biased narratives? Am I trying to go beyond that? Am I trying to see this in a bigger picture? Right? Because we can only relate to facts when it's not personal. This is why in science, there are so many procedures. I'm sure you're aware of this. You know, when any form of study or clinical trial, whatever it is, you have to remove the personal bias. So there's so many ways to both control that and try to filter away anything personal, because that would immediately contaminate any scientific value. So it's when we expand our context and understanding to a level where it's not personal anymore. Again, the bigger picture always has to be bigger than us. Where we try to see things, even when we talk of the horizontal consciousness, see things in historical lines, see things beyond a nation, beyond group interest. Right? Always try to choose a bigger approach so we can then study. But remember that what we're talking about today, it's always happened. Don't trust anyone because you don't have to. Life is a journey, it's about exploring. And information is a jungle. And it's up to you to learn how to use it beneficially for yourself and others. But humans aren't lying little creatures, because that has proven to work better than speaking the truth. It's just how it is. So try then to be aware of your own bias first, right? And try to have fun with it when you watch the news and try to see the bias. Not saying that there's anything wrong with it. Be aware of it and seeing that humans are not able to present information without also presenting the narrative. And if they have a narrative, it's because they want to sell something. It can be being right, it can be whatever it is, but be aware of it. And then see that as just part of it. You can filter that out, you can still see what happens, but always be aware there are probably more angles to this, right? There are probably more different approaches. So don't let your own bias be bought, saying, yeah, I just knew it. This is exactly, So when you're triggered, that's fine. But always remind yourself that there is something also bigger here, and there's probably different ways of looking at this. Just try to be open, and then try the bigger picture. Also, what does this reflect in me in my spiritual journey? How can I use this to get a deeper understanding of myself instead of judging? Right? News today, information is about triggering, it's about conflict, it's about judging, it's about polarization. If you take that away, you can look at yourself and say, like, okay, now I was triggered. Okay, in what way am I doing this? Right? How is this an image of my journey? How can I be more aware of how I make up things? Right? How I filter, how I can twist information to fit my own narratives. So try to be in that space as well when we follow the news, because being human is fun, right? And when we include that this is how we relate to information, and now it's out in the open, we don't have to be sucked into it. We can just take, this is where humans are, and I can relate to that. I can take my personal responsibility in this by not being part of that game. But then I have to look at myself, look at my own biology, look at my own genetic approach to information and how I get triggered and my own chemicals and how I want what I feel to be true. All of that, and just look at it and be in self-observation. Because I think today when we watch news or read information, we need to observe ourselves at the same time. It's like, how does this play into my own journey? Why am I drawn to this? Is this part of my own storytelling? Is this part of my own bias? Remember that when you were presented with news or a newspaper, you read maybe 2% of it, right? Because you're biased. You already have a narrative. You already have a story, and you pick out whatever you feel, this is my reality. Try to challenge yourself. Try to seek other news sources, not because they necessarily represent truth, but because it's just interesting to see how we create different types of bias, different filters. And it's all okay. And saying that, we're supposed to be in different positions. We're not supposed to agree. That would go against evolution. And enjoy it. But then also reflect upon the fact that we as individuals, we are doing the same. We're never neutral, we're never objective, and we don't have to be. But also spiritually, when we create that story that I have truth and other people have misunderstood everything, like right? Look at that thing. And whatever we are drawn to, what stories we make up, try to look at that. Try to look at how we turn everything into beliefs and religion, because it makes us feel good and because then we are right. Right? Explore it and play with it. But to me, it's more about like being realistic of this is part of the human journey. There's nothing wrong with it. It has worked throughout evolution. But spiritually, we have to kind of grow past that. And it's more difficult than we would like to believe. Because we're in this life form, right? But it means we have to take responsibility for ourselves, right? Because often what we do is we attack other people because they don't believe the right things, right? Try to look at this whole complex in yourself, which is like, if you react to this game outside of you, it's because you're already part of it. When you're not part of it, you will have no need to change it, and you will not judge it. Because you start with your own alignment, and then you realize, well, everybody has their journey. And that consists of all of this, and souls have decided to incarnate into this culture and life form to experience also this. It serves a spiritual purpose in the journey of awakening. And I have to take my own responsibility seriously and learn how I relate to information. and that we've reached a point in the human evolution where we're supposed to kind of make that shift. I have to do my part, but I can't do so by being in a state of disconnection. I have to reevaluate how I connect to information, how I interpret, right? So use all of this to mirror yourself and to discover more advanced ways. And then you will just see that everything is just fun. The moment you don't have to believe anything, but that you see that your journey is eternal. It's beyond this culture, it's beyond this planet. It's just interesting to study. So you can mirror yourself and understand yourself in certain ways, but try to go beyond it. Enjoy the journey. Enjoy being human. Don't take any of it seriously. And stop believing.
Thank you, IKYA. The invitation is there. Let's lean in, engage, and stop believing. This has been IKYA Live. Thank you all for joining us. We are back every Monday at 7 o'clock Oslo time. And remember that these teachings, this consciousness, manifests and incarnates on the planet by us sharing it and living it. So subscribe to IKYA on YouTube. Share our IKYA channel with others. Share this episode with others. Invite others to join you to watch and participate next Monday. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. You know, it's really in that's also really a conversation as well. And the more we share, the more we discuss, the more we invite others, the more that this consciousness can lift all of us. So again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next Monday at 7 o'clock.